May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be now and always acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I always start my mystery classes with a brief set of learning goals. These are the themes that students write into their notebooks so that they know what to listen for, sort of the big banner headlines. And I'm apparently incapable of leaving that habit in the classroom. Though I can't help but notice none of you brought your notebooks or writing utensils this morning. Well, as I would tell my students if they come to class unprepared, good luck on the quiz. So in any event, here are today's themes or learning goals. Number 1, judgment is truth arriving. Judgment is truth arriving. Number 2, sorting is not formation. Sorting is not formation. Number 3, ask a better question. Ask a better question. And number 4, the field is ours to tend. The field is ours to tend. And the reason why I chose those themes is because today's gospel lesson can do real damage if we hear it the way many of us were probably taught to hear it. Fear-based religion has done real harm, and its roots run deep. For example, many of us learn to hear the apocalyptic language like that in today's gospel as a threat. Fear, punishment, to anxiously question whether we belong, whether we're loved, whether God is waiting for us with mercy or with a furnace. But this passage, I think, is not asking us to imagine some future scene where angels forcibly sort humanity into wheat and weeds. I think it's asking something more revealing and more freeing. What happens when truth finally arrives? What happens when what's fruitful and what's destructive can no longer hide? Not from God, not from one another, and not from ourselves. Maybe judgment isn't God waiting to punish us. Maybe judgment is truth arriving. Not truth as humiliation, not truth as revenge, truth as what becomes visible when God's mercy gives us the courage to finally see what's truly real. Judgment is truth arriving when contempt has to call itself contempt, when harm can no longer hide behind the language of righteousness, when mercy finally appears as mercy. And we don't have to guess what God's mercy looks like. We look to Jesus. His mercy is right there in the parable today. But before we decide what the parable means, I want us to notice how it works on us, because if we treat it like a fable, we'll completely miss the point. A fable gives us a definite moral. Slow and steady wins the race. Don't cry wolf. But parables do something stranger. They don't hand us a story so much as push us to ask a better question. Parables aren't just cute stories. They're scalpels meant to cut our confidence in our understanding of what we think of as reality. A parable throws one story alongside another reality until we see differently. Most of us, though, were taught to read parables as if they were algebra problems, right? This character equals God. This character equals us. That character is someone we don't like very much. Solve for X and draw a box around the answer, right? But Jesus' parables are rarely interested in giving us something simple enough to box. Jesus begins, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field." Matthew calls it the kingdom of heaven, which can mislead us if we hear heaven and immediately think afterlife. Jesus isn't giving us a way or a roadmap of where people go when they die. He's giving us a way to see this field differently, this world, this community, this self, yourself. this strange mixture of wheat and weeds growing in the same field where we find ourselves. And that's where this becomes personal for me, and I hope for all of us, because the parable is about how we learn to see this field as it exists here and now. It's what happens when God's truth and mercy start taking root here in exactly the mixed up field around us and inside us. Now, as a professor, I know that there are times when I have to make judgments about what students understand. Right? But I also know that if you assess too soon with the wrong tool or with too much confidence, you can mistake unfinished learning for failure. Right? You can harm the very growth you're trying to support. So sorting is not formation. Sorting asks, which category do you belong in? Formation asks, what is God still growing here? And that's what I hear in this parable. The servants aren't wrong that something's growing in the field. They're wrong that they can safely sort it now. Many scholars think that the parable itself likely does go back to Jesus in some form, though the explanation that follows is Matthew's interpretation of the parable for his community. I'm not saying we should throw Matthew's explanation away, but I think it may narrow Jesus' parable before it really has had a chance to finish doing its work on us. I wonder whether Matthew's explanation gives us the question we most want to ask, but not the question Jesus wants us to ask. Maybe Jesus wants us to ask a better question. Matthew's explanation asks, who is the wheat? Who are the weeds? Who's the enemy? Who are the reapers? And those are natural questions, but Jesus' parable may be asking something more revealing and more unsettling. Why are you so eager to sort? And this is where the parable catches us. Jesus sets, I think, an unsettling rhetorical trap. He lets us feel the servant's confidence. Do you want us to go and gather the weeds, they ask? And we instinctively know the answer. Of course we should. We can see what's wrong. We can see what's harmful. We can see what needs to be removed. And then Jesus springs that rhetorical trap. Just when we're sure we know the right answer, the farmer says, no. Not because weeds are good, not because harm doesn't matter, not because Jesus is telling us to be passive in the face of cruelty. The farmer says no because the servants can't uproot the weeds without damaging the wheat. Sorting is not formation. And we Christians aren't immune from needing to hear that wisdom. I'm not immune from needing to hear that wisdom because we are not simply wheat looking out at the weeds. We ourselves are mixed fields. We can work for justice and still take pleasure in feeling morally superior. I know this in myself. There are people whose cruelty and chaos make me want to say, surely they are beyond grace. But that's precisely the hoe that Jesus does not hand me, or any of us. When we discover that we are wheat and weeds growing in the same soil, judgment is truth arriving. And maybe the prayer this parable asks of us today is not, Lord, show me who the weeds are. Maybe it's the prayer of today's psalmist. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Because judgment is truth arriving, then the first truth we need is not the truth about those people out there, it's the truth about us. And if that's true in us, it's also true in the places we inhabit together. Paul says creation itself is groaning, waiting for freedom. Here in Los Osos, we know that. We know that the land under us, the water below us, the habitat around us, and the people beside us are all bound together. Housing, water, habitat, and community aren't separate plants in separate pots. You want more affordable housing in the area? Me too. Where are we going to get the water? Pull on one, something else moves. It doesn't mean that we stop making decisions. Humility doesn't mean pretending every answer is equally faithful. It means not turning the people who disagree with us into weeds. St. Benedict's is a community that cares about the earth. This is a community that cares about our neighbors who are hungry, who are unhoused, who are just unsure where they belong. The Abundant Shop, our Earth Care work, and the feeding ministries of this congregation, they're not abstractions and they're not hobbies. They're how we tend the field. But the temptation remains, even in communities committed to justice, even in communities committed to welcome, even in communities committed to mercy, we can still become servants with a weed whacker in our hands. Convinced that if we could just get rid of the wrong sorts of people, the field would finally be pure. But like the farmer, Jesus says no. Because the kingdom of heaven doesn't grow by our fantasy of a perfect field. The kingdom of heaven grows in mixed soil because mixed soil is the only kind we got. In this parable, Jesus shows us that mercy is what lets us tell the truth without destroying ourselves or one another. Not truth for sorting, but truth for formation. Friends, if fear taught us to hear these passages as threats, Jesus teaches us to hear them differently. Because if judgment is truth arriving, then judgment isn't God finally losing patience and becoming cruel. Judgment doesn't come to burn up what God has been growing. Judgment, as Jesus teaches us to see it, is the arrival of reality seen through God's mercy. It's the moment when what gives life and what destroys life can finally be named. It's the moment when lies and demagoguery can no longer rename reality. It's the moment when love is revealed as love, mercy as mercy, fruit as fruit. Truth arrives joined to mercy and grace. It doesn't come to dig up what's good. It comes to set free what's good from everything that's been choking it. That's the work of the church after Pentecost. Not to escape the field, not to sort the field, not to stand outside the field and point at the weeds, but to live in and tend the field as people shaped by Jesus' truth, mercy, and grace. So if judgment is truth arriving, but not truth for sorting, maybe the question isn't who should we pull up? We need to ask a better question. What would it mean to tend this field faithfully today? The answer is not do nothing. The answer is not avoid tough decisions, avoid accountability, avoid responsibility, avoid the truth. The servants aren't asked to pretend there aren't any weeds. The answer is Jesus' charge to us. Bear fruit. Tell the truth. Feed and shelter your neighbors. Care for the fragile ecology of this place. Resist cruelty without becoming cruel. Resist evil without allowing evil to set the terms of that resistance. Be soil for formation. And by God's grace, that is work we can actually do. Now, in a few moments, we'll come to this table as people who grow wheat and weeds in the same soil, not to be sorted by threats or fear, not for solace only, but for strength, to be nourished and formed by grace and sent back into the field to bear fruit. Judgment is truth arriving. And when that truth is God's truth, when that truth is the truth we see in Jesus, it doesn't come to destroy the wheat. It comes to set it free, to shine like the sun. Amen.